Hello. In this video, we're going to be looking at cross-text connections. Now, some tips for this kind of question. Firstly, you need to look at the main themes and arguments that are being posed here. If you're able to understand everything clearly, then in each text, then and the arguments that they're making, then you're able to see what exactly the bridge is between each text. What is the connection here? Number two, you want to compare the tone and purpose in both texts, because sometimes they might be talking about arguments being made and evidence. So if able to talk about the tone and purpose behind each text, whether one text is to disprove another or support another, what each text author is thinking about the other's one works. If you can make those connections using evidence and reasoning, then you'll be in good shape for this kind of question. Structural differences are also worth considering here, especially because since different types of text can occur in both text 1 and text 2, and compare and contrast between both texts. Again, this is going to be more apparent when we see practice problems over here. So I'm going to do practice problem number 1, and in the next practice problems, we'll tackle them together. So, what is this asking us here? How would Singh and Roy in text 2 most likely respond to the research discussed in text 1? So let's see. Let's start off with text 2 this time because we're trying to see how they'd respond. Governments in democratic countries function better than when more people vote. However, forcing people to vote may have negative consequences. Singh and Roy studied what happens in a country when a country requires its citizens to vote. They found that when people feel forced to vote, they spend less time looking for information about the choices when voting. As a result, votes may not represent their actual preferences. And then text 1 is reading public policy researcher Anthony Fowler studied the history of elections in Australia, a country that requires citizens to vote. They argue that requiring citizens to vote leads to a significant increase in voters who would otherwise have not had the time or energy or motivation to vote. Thus, election results in countries that require citizens to vote better reflect the preferences of a country as a whole. So for this one, we can see that C is the best answer here, because text 2 is essentially stating that requiring people to vote doesn't necessarily lead to election outcomes that better represent the preferences of a country as a whole. So essentially, even though more people vote here, it doesn't really mean that it reflects the preferences of a country because they're being forced to vote. They don't really focus on information, and it doesn't really focus on the preferences. They're only voting for the sake of voting, which is what contrasts what text 1 is saying. Right, try pausing this one and figuring this one on your own. If you selected choice B, you are correct. This is the best answer here, because the thing is, author 1 states that Ailey had a deep admiration for jazz music, and that helped bring jazz to life for his audience. Author 2 is stating that jazz is present throughout Ailey's work. Authors, both of them are naming different aspects of his work that are as the most influenced by jazz, but both of them both agree with the statement that there was a strong influence of jazz. All right, you know the drill by now. Pause, try to figure this one out. The correct answer is D. Now, let's start because it presents the statement of which text 1 and text 2, both of their authors would agree with something. Now, most microbes are probably unable to withstand the soil conditions at the Antarctic study site. So, text 1 states that microbes usually thrive in very harsh conditions. And so Ferrer's team was surprised when samples collected from extremely cold and dry area of Antarctica didn't have any life in it. They said that this doesn't conclusively prove that there are no microbes in the area, but it suggests that microbes would have had a notably difficult time surviving in this environment. The author of text 2 is saying that it's unlikely that there wouldn't be any microbes at all in the Antarctic study site from which they retrieved the soil samples. So this would have been making it difficult to detect microbes in the samples. But the thing is, the presence of only a few microbes in the Antarctic samples rather than the billions found in a typical soil sample, which would have been easier to detect, this would illustrate conditions in the Antarctic soil that make it difficult for them to survive. They're essentially saying that since the seeming absence of microbes in the Antarctic sample are there, it suggests an unusually harsh environment. And text 2 is essentially saying that even though there are few undetectable microbes in the samples, the small amount of microbes would also suggest an unusually harsh environment. So both text 1 and text 2 are both agreeing that the soil conditions are very harsh. And so they're not microbes aren't really able to withstand the conditions there. So this one was a bit long of an explanation, but the idea is relatively simple. All right, practice problem number 4. The correct answer for this one is B. Now, it provides empirical evidence that the current understanding of an aspect of physics at a microscopic level must be incomplete. So author 1 is essentially saying that the puzzle physicists can't solve at a microscopic level, the laws of physics suggest that we should be able to reverse processes that aren't reversible at a macroscopic level, and maybe even turn back time. So the experiment confirmed that the processes aren't reversible even on the microscopic level, but it didn't tell us why. So this is what supports author one's point that physicists don't fully understand everything at the microscopic level, and that the laws might still need to be revised because they're not really complete yet. Now, let's do practice problem number 5. This is going to be a challenging question, as well as number 6, the one after this. For this one, choice B is the correct answer. Now, this is because it clearly reflects how text 1 would respond to text two's findings. So, the study by Florian and his colleagues found that deforestation would be reduced by half over the next 30 years if 20% of beef consumed worldwide was replaced with microprotein. So, text 1 points that microprotein is not widely available because of the high production cost. But it also says that the problem could be addressed by creation of a cheaper substrate to feed microprotein. So this suggests that text 1 is asserting that developing a less expensive microprotein substrate would lead to reducing deforestation, described in this findings of text 2. If reducing the cost of microprotein increases access to it, then microprotein may be able to replace beef in more people's diet and then reduce deforestation, which is associated with beef production. Lastly, with practice problem number 6, please take a few seconds to go through this one. Take a minute or so. The correct answer for this one is C. Now, this is the best answer here because text 2 is stating that the researchers used cosmogenic nuclide dating to avoid the potential for misdating, and this would be caused by the geology of Sturkfontein. And text 1 is describing this as challenging and unreliable. So because of that, C is the best answer. I hope this video helped you with cross-text questions. So I appreciate you watching this video. Good luck and see you in the next video.